All right. Now, as you will recall, the British had given their last um constitutional reforms in 1909. And the commitment of the British was that every 10 years, more reforms will be introduced. And as a result of those reforms, more power will be transferred to the Indians. And they will be, well, to use the British high-handed and racist narrative of the time, they would be prepared for self-government, as if the British were the only people who were prepared to run their country, and the Indians were not. Somehow the Indians were lesser people, both Hindus and Muslims, they were less, and they had to be prepared. And this has been called the white man's burden. It's a very racist way of looking at humanity, when a white man, well, with I'm not in any way trying to prejudice or show any kind of dislike for the British or the white people. We don't show such proclivities. But at the time, the accepted thinking was that yes, the Indians are not fit to run their own country. And in this environment, two great self-proclaimed reformers appeared who thought that they could address the Indian problem and bring about major reforms in 1919, exactly 10 years after the reforms of 1909. The Minto Mole formula was introduced. So in 1917, Lord Chelmsford was the Viceroy of India. Now, please do keep this in mind. This is a pair that works. The highest office in India is the Viceroy of India. He's like the King of India, but responsible to an office in London, which is called the Secretary of State for India. So the Viceroy comes under the Secretary of State for India. The Secretary of State for India comes under the Prime Minister of Great Britain, and then he, of course, comes under the Crown, the sovereign. So usually, the constitutional reforms that took place in India were agreed upon by both the Viceroy, who in this case was Chelmsford, and by Lord Edwin Montagu, Lord Edwin Samuel Montagu, if I remember his name correctly. So these two agreed that measure of responsibility should be given to the Indians, and that was something that was agreed in 1909. The important thing is that you had to give the Indians a measure of power and a measure of self-government which was acceptable to them. And that is one thing where the British uh, consistently made mistakes. They did not really realize that whatever reforms they introduced should have been enough from the point of view of the Indians, not from the point of view of the British. Anyway, these two great thinkers, these two great self-proclaimed reformers, made a lot of changes, and one of the changes that they made was very cosmetic. They changed the name of the Legislative Council to the Imperial Legislative Assembly. All right. Now that word comes from France because their parliament, which was formed after their revolution, was called the National Assembly. So it sounded like they were giving a measure of autonomy and power to the Indians. There were to be 145 members, and out of these 145, 103 will be elected. Now that's a good thing. That's a good thing. A sizable number will be elected. Then there will be the princess. Please keep in mind the princes are the rulers of the states. British India is divided into states and provinces. So the states will have their own council, and the Council of Princes was set up with 108 members, and they will debate the important things. Now, the important thing in this reform is the introduction of the system of dyarchy. Now, what is dyarchy? It's a system which has been borrowed basically from Roman times, from the time of, let's say, Julius Caesar. Now, when Rome was run by two rulers, not one, it was called the system of consuls in Rome. Now we are discussing, uh, we're discussing a period of time which is slightly before Christ. So Rome is run by two countries. This system was then, in the modern times, it was not called consul system. It was called the co-rule system or the dyarchy system. All right, and this system is then introduced in these great reforms, great as these two men used to call them. So the subjects in the provinces. Remember, right now in the central part of India, in the central government, there's not a lot of democracy. All the changes are taking place in the provinces. So what happens in the provinces? That there are members. Members here means like ministers who are elected, and they are responsible to the provincial legislative councils. Now, please keep in mind, legislative councils make laws. That's why they are called legislative for the provinces. Now, certain subjects will be under the control of these councils. Okay, the ministers will be responsible to the councils. The provincial ministers will be responsible to the councils in the provinces. Now, these subjects were together called transferred subjects, which meant they had been transferred to the provinces completely. Now, these included local government, education, public health, public works, and forests, maintenance of forests. But then there were certain subjects related to the provinces only, which were controlled by, not by the ministers but by the governors themselves. Now the governor in a province has to be a figurehead leader. He does not really run the government. He is not answerable to the elected representative, so he doesn't run things. He's just there as a symbol of the governor general. But here he has a lot of powers. He has what is called the reserved subjects. Reserve means that these subjects are not to be handed over to the elected ministers. Now, who are these people? These people are responsible to the governor general. They are not responsible to the governor general, would come later. Right now, the viceroy. They're responsible to the governor general, and these governor generals then will give their approval. They have a veto on whether what has to be done in the provinces. Now, these subjects which come under the governor and for which he's not answerable to the elected council in the province includes justice, police, revenue, power resources, press and publication, basically all the things that you need to control and run a state. So these are the reserve subjects, and they are kept in the hands of the governors who are unelected, who are not responsible to the elected representatives, and they are responsible to the governor general. All right, the British also say that they're extending voting rights to more people. Okay, but only 2% of India's people could still vote. Now, these reforms fall far short. I mean, you can increase the size of the council, you can call it anything. Okay, you can increase the council of the state. You can have 60 members there, and you can have 33 elected out of there. But at the end of the day, if you look at the system, you have not transferred power completely to the people. You have not transferred. You've not asked all the people to vote in an election, or only a very small percentage of people gets to vote. So this is something that falls far short of what should happen in a democracy. And the result is that people are not happy with it. The Black Act or the Rowlatt Act is passed in order to uh, in order to control the unrest, because the British do foresee unrest in the country, especially as the First World War is going on. They are not interested in putting up with unrest, so they pass a black law which is called the Rowlatt Act. And the Rowlatt Act is passed in, if I remember, February 1919. And immediately as a result, Jinnah resigns, and he foresees trouble in the future. And he's absolutely right. The trouble comes in the form of the Jallianwala Bagh massacre, which we will see now, how it unfolded. There was a crowd of people who had gathered in the holiest of the holy ground, in Amritsar, and which as you know is a city holy to the Sikhs, and that is where uh, fire was opened on them, and they were massacred, basically. So we will see the Jallianwala Bagh massacre in detail in the next video. But this is what the Montagu Chelmsford reforms achieve. Basically, they achieve nothing. Okay, if you look at it, the Montagu Chelmsford reforms, what do they achieve? They achieve unrest. They achieve frustration. 10 years of waiting have produced nothing. Okay. And basically it leads to more repression in India. Let's look at the proposals for the Montagu Chelmsford reform once again. Number one, the Legislative Council becomes the Imperial Legislative Assembly. It has 145 members, out of which 103 are elected. The period is 3 years. Separate electorates for Muslims, and six are there, and 32 seats are reserved for the Muslims. The Council of the State, which is responsible for the management of the issues of the princely states, is 60, and the Council of the Princes it has 108 members. But please do keep in mind, the Council of the Princes has no authority. The princes sit there, they can talk, but all the decision is made by the British government. The central government for the Indians is restricted, and the viceroy can now pass any law he chooses. So what kind of reforms are these? Okay, this is not, these are not reforms. They are a mockery of reforms. They are a travesty of reforms. And the British uh, just just create a situation where the people react by showing their anger, by showing their disappointment, and the British react by passing the Rowlatt Act, in which they say that we can arrest anybody without a warrant. Basically, they suspend all civil rights. Indians have no rights now. We will arrest anyone without a warrant. We can detain anyone without a bail, and the right of the provincial government the provincial government has been given exclusive right to tell the people where they will live and where they will not live. Now, this is, of course, unacceptable to a constitutionalist like Qaid Azam Muhammad Ali Jinnah. He will not put up with this. These are against the principles with which he has lived throughout his life and which he continues to uphold uh, to the end of his life. So Mr. Jinnah will resign, and as a result of this, the Amritsar massacre or the Jallianwala Bagh massacre will take place, and we will have a look at that massacre in the video which is coming up. Thank you very much indeed.